Derwent Valley Mills and World Heritage. What is it all about? Over the next few minutes, we'll be taking you through some of the key points relating to the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site, covering inscription, the responsibilities it brings, the challenges we face, and our hopes for the future. You can see from the map that the 15-mile site follows the course of the River Derwent, from Masson Mills at Matlock Bath in the north, down to Derby in the south, passing through Cromford, Belper, Milford and Darley Abbey. The story of World Heritage begins with the building of Egypt's Aswan High Dam in 1960. The rising water levels it would bring threatened ancient Egyptian temples, including the renowned Abu Simbel. This prompted a UNESCO-led international campaign that raised funds of around $80 million from 50 countries to move the temples to higher points above the new waterline. The success of this campaign led to further work to save and protect globally significant heritage sites, including Venice in Italy after the flood of November 1966, the ruins of this Bronze Age city in Pakistan, and this Indonesian Buddhist temple. All these campaigns highlighted the importance of all nations having a shared responsibility for heritage of the highest global significance. In 1972, a World Heritage Convention was held for the protection of the world's cultural and natural heritage. It was agreed to inscribe on a World Heritage list sites which were considered to be part of the world heritage of mankind as a whole and deserve protection and transmission to future generations. Since that time, UNESCO's World Heritage Committee has met at least once a year, with the exception of 2020, to inscribe sites onto the World Heritage List which have outstanding universal value. They meet certain criteria for authenticity and integrity and have adequate protection and management to ensure their transmission to future generations. They also assess how sites already on the list are being protected and managed. OUV, that's Outstanding Universal Value, which underpins the whole World Heritage process. Sites being put forward must be very clear in how they meet that important criterion. It's important at this point to understand that value systems are not static. They evolve. Industrial heritage and 20th century architecture are now valued in a way that they just weren't 40 years ago. The additions to the list in recent times reflect this new, wider appreciation of our heritage. So what were the criteria which the Derwent Valley Mills specifically met when they were put forward for inscription in 2001? Firstly, we met C2, that the site must exhibit an important interchange of human values over a span of time or within a cultural area of the world on developments in architecture or technology, monumental arts, town planning or landscape design. It was recorded. The Derwent Valley saw the birth of the factory system, when new types of building were erected to house the new technology for spinning cotton developed by Richard Arkwright. The second was C4, that the site must be an outstanding example of a type of building or architectural or technological ensemble or landscape which illustrates a significant stage in human history. It was recorded in the Derwent Valley for the first time there was large-scale industrial production in a hitherto rural landscape. The need to provide housing and other facilities for workers and managers resulted in the creation of the first modern industrial settlements. It's interesting to note that the UNESCO criteria also change over time to meet those changing value systems. And this is our statement of outstanding universal value. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it. But it does set out briefly but clearly the significant role of the Derwent Valley Mills in world history and what aspects of the surviving heritage best encapsulate its outstanding universal value. It is essential for monitoring and for periodic reporting, which UNESCO requires about once a decade, and for danger listing and, in the event of a worst case scenario, deletion from the World Heritage List if that heritage is lost. It provides a key measurement of impact on the defined attributes which encapsulate those key values. Attributes help us understand OUV, and then there are elements which are structures that define the site's attributes to the global community. These are important as a group, but must be treated as a whole. So what are these attributes? we now have 5, and the first relates to the successful harnessing of natural energy to deliver the power to drive newly devised machines housed in mills to produce goods of superior quality at an unprecedented rate. Elements which define this include the mills themselves, but also water wheels, water coursers, mill ponds, culverts, leats, soughs, aqueducts, launders, mill yards, weirs, officers, and chimneys. The second relates to the creation and development of a new way of life resulting from the need for people to congregate together in factories, producing goods of superior quality at an unprecedented rate, sometimes in formal rural, non-urban locations, with attendant intensification of agriculture for provisioning. Elements include mill workers and overseers' houses, pigsties, allotments, mill owners' houses with their parks and gardens, shops, chapels, churches, schools, farms, and inns. The third involves the dissemination of the new technology and new mode of mass production from the Derwent Valley to other parts of the UK, Europe and North America. So the elements already discussed, which were copied to begin the new cotton spinning process into Europe. The first was in Rattingen, Germany, and called Cromford Mill. And then across to America, where Samuel Slater initiated the birth of a new industrial nation through the opening of a mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. The fourth attribute relates to the introduction of new modes of transportation and utilities, including turnpike roads, toll houses, canals, wharfs, weighbridges, tramways, railways, railway stations, bridges, cuttings and workshops, metalled roads, gasworks, street lighting and reservoirs. And finally, a relict industrial landscape where late 18th and early 19th century industrial development can still be seen in an 18th and 19th century agricultural landscape containing evidence of other early industrial activity. Elements include enclosure field boundaries and patterns, designed landscapes, ancient woodland, pastoral farmland, tree plantations, farms, hosiery and nail warehouses, nail shops, nailers' houses, nailmasters' houses, quarries and lead mines. So they're the attributes. Now let's talk about the buffer zone. It's now a requirement that all World Heritage Sites are inscribed with a buffer zone, which identifies the immediate setting and is expected to have a special status, ensuring that setting is maintained and allows a better appreciation of the heritage site's attributes. With the Derwent Valley Mills, that setting is actually an attribute in itself, as we've identified, so is even more precious. The buffer zone is identified here in a darker green on the map. It extends from skyline to skyline in the north. As the valley sides flatten out in the south, the extent of the buffer zone is reduced, although the eastern part of Belper is included as it sits on rising ground. The wider setting cannot be so readily zoned, and the potential impacts of tall structures, such as wind turbines, are considered on a case-by-case basis. The UNESCO list of World Heritage in Danger highlights to the international community the conditions which threaten the characteristics for which a property was inscribed, and then encourages corrective action. A property is inscribed on the list of World Heritage in Danger if dangers can be ascertained, so are specific and proven imminent threats, or potential threats which could negatively affect its outstanding universal value. Ascertained threats include natural disasters, pollution, poaching, armed conflict, uncontrolled urbanisation, and unchecked tourist development. Are there threats to the outstanding universal value of the Derwent Valley Mills? Sadly, yes, on a number of fronts. The first is through neglect, where structures are left without repair to become less and less stable. In the event of collapse, UNESCO could well hold us to account. Secondly, a lack of funds or knowledge from property owners can lead to inappropriate changes which impact on OUV, such as plastic windows, as seen here. Flooding is a big one for us. Always an issue when so many key properties lie by their power source, the river. The problem is escalating as climate change impacts on the valley. In November 2019, and again in February 2020, The basement of Strutt's North Mill Museum, again in Belper, took in a huge volume of water. Because of inappropriate changes made to the basement floor in the 1990s, the water now becomes trapped and causes considerable damage to the structure of this globally significant iron-framed building. Another big one for us is development. This can be the destruction of historic buildings directly or their setting. Already, UNESCO and the UK Planning Inspectorate have identified that the accumulation of developments which make relatively small impacts on our OUV will, over time, destroy the relic landscape setting, which is an attribute and part of why we were inscribed. We are incredibly fortunate that the larger rural landscape setting for the Derwent Valley Mills and their communities has survived. It gives a sense of how rural England had this revolutionary new practice, factories, inserted into a largely agricultural landscape. This landscape is still discernible as cotton spinning moved early on to Lancashire, so our mills and communities are arrested in time, largely unaltered by industrialisation and urbanisation. It is important the setting of the World Heritage Site remains rural. This rural setting is, arguably, the most in danger of all the World Heritage Site's attributes and needs careful monitoring to ensure it is not overwhelmed or eroded by development. World Heritage status and our role as coordinators for its protection and transmission isn't about preventing development. We're here to try and ensure sympathetic development in the right place and of the right quality. We always have to ask, does it impact on OUV? So these are the terms you need to be familiar with concerning World Heritage Sites and their protection. Outstanding Universal Value, the Statement of Outstanding Universal Value, Attributes and Elements, the Buffer Zone, and World Heritage in Danger. Right, let's move on to other things.
The impact of COVID has meant another year which has been different to what we would usually expect. We have postponed most in-person events and activities that we would be running as part of our normal work to engage our partners, volunteers and visitors to the Valley until next year. Although some are still taking place in person, and where this has not been possible, it has been carried out online. Education is a key part of being a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There are programmes that are delivered by our partners in Derbyshire Environmental Studies Service with formal and informal learning for school groups and families. This year this has taken place on an irregular basis as the attractions have slowly reopened and have welcomed school groups and also delivered family-based activities in the holidays. Our sites work because of the volunteers. They cover so many roles that keep the attractions open and encourage visitors to come. There are front of house and behind the scenes roles, including ones that can be done from home, something to suit everyone. For a number of years, we delivered a successful festival called Discovery Days during the October half term. We began looking at how we could refresh the festival and were working on a new Georgian festival in partnership with Buxton Crescent. We had originally planned to deliver the pilot in September, but were unable to make that happen due to the uncertainty around restrictions. The new Georgian Derbyshire Festival is now planned for September 2022. This will be our pilot and it will be run in both the Derwent Valley and Buxton with lots of promotion at both locations for people to visit both areas if they wish. We will also be running some events at both sites so people don't miss out if they are unable to travel. Every year we usually have a small thank you event for our volunteers where we hand out awards, a certificate and an engraved bobbin, to show that we appreciate their work throughout the year. We have not been able to do this the last 2 years, but are hoping that we can arrange this next year, as we are really grateful for all the hours they put in to keep so many of our attractions open with their knowledge and enthusiasm and commitment. We also usually arrange a thank you trip for the volunteers by visiting another heritage attraction. This is a learning opportunity to see how other attractions work and if we can implement any findings, but it's also an opportunity for the volunteers from across all the different attractions to come together. We have a trip all ready to run and we will be taking the volunteers to Liverpool to the International Slavery Museum next year. This ties in with the work that has been carried out by partners looking at our links to enslavement and also learning how we can better communicate this learning to the wider public. The Ambassador scheme has been running for a number of years now, and it started in Belper and has been rolled out to Darley Abbey and Milford, and Cromford is next on the list. We have delayed delivering these sessions as they are best run in person, so we'll start again in the spring. The scheme is aimed at the retailers. Anybody who works in the businesses in the town can come along to find out more about where they work and sometimes live, so that if visitors have any questions about what there is to see and do in the locality, they can inform them. The idea is to keep visitors in the area for longer by letting them know what there is to see and do. We will be looking into the option of recording the actual tour and making it available to retailers online so that they can still have the information. We usually provide a pack to everyone who attends with leaflets from local attractions, maps, a highlight of the area guide with key telephone numbers. One of the key benefits of the Ambassador scheme was the interaction of the people who took part in the training as they went around on the tour. Discussing common issues meant there was a good opportunity for them to share ideas, supplies and information, and this will not happen with the online version, so it should be an additional resource rather than instead of the tour. One of the real success stories over the last few years has been at Darley Abbey Mills. The majority of the site is under ownership by a family. They have spent a lot of time over the last 10 years bringing empty buildings on the mill site back into use for businesses to rent out, particularly in the creative industry sector. West Mill was one of those buildings and is now home to a successful wedding venue over 4 floors. There are now also a number of new eating and drinking venues within the complex, and the views of the river have been opened up, making it more of an inviting and bustling area for people to visit and enjoy. Another success for the World Heritage Site is the reopening of the Silk Mill as the Museum of Making. It finally opened in May after a delay due to COVID. It is a contemporary space telling Derby's 300-year history of making to inspire new creativity. It is a free-to-enter museum and the southern gateway to the World Heritage Site.
I'd like to end by touching on the relevance of the Derwent Valley Mills for us in the present day. It is, of course, important to appreciate and celebrate the achievements here in the valley in terms of the factory system and mass production, but it's important to remember this: the energy used here to power all of the early mills was carbon-free and renewable. Those mills that followed elsewhere, and to some extent in later years some of the Derwent Valley mills, turned to carbon fuels to power their factories, but water always lay at the heart of power provision, particularly at the Arkwright and Strutt mills in Cromford, Belper and Milford. Even today, the Milford mills have gone, but the turbines survive and now provide carbon neutral power to the national grid. It's the same at Belper and Masson. It's not just with water power where the World Heritage Site's history can inform the future. The Strutts, in particular, created farms so that they could properly feed large communities of mill workers. They used factory methods and technology to make the most of the land they had, but it was all to make those communities sustainable. They were all close to the people they were trying to feed, such as here at Crossroads Farm, from where the Belper mills can still be seen. The Strutts had developed a system for providing adequate food for rapidly growing communities, coupled with efficient, low-carbon energy. Inscription on the World Heritage List has acknowledged our outstanding universal value. These are places of significance in world history, and World Heritage status is a designation like no other. These are complex, multi-layered sites which have a degree of protection not otherwise available. But this isn't just about looking back. We can learn from the past to provide a better future, a sustainable future. The Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site could be an exemplar in showing how past successes, the provision of sustainable, low-carbon communities, could inform us in securing a future on our increasingly fragile world. These websites will help you find out more about the Derwent Valley Mills and the new management plan.